But I'm saying if we're lucky, it'll be a large economic crash. If it were not, there will be an economic crash of some significance in the summer that gets us all thinking about the economic component of it. We're all sitting there still sort of grumbling over it, when in the midst of all of that, we wake up and maybe there's something like what we're terming the Zionist mistake, which would be an Israeli air attack on Iran.
The Zionist mistake. So how much language is showing up which might suggest that the Zionists go ahead and decide to do it themselves, to make the world safe for democracy?
Well, there's already a lot of language out there consciously, and so we've been picking up the unconscious stream for that for maybe 8 months. So on a number basis, it's really meaningless to say that, well, there's 60% more now than there was 8 months ago. But initially, 8 months before anybody was really talking about the Israelis doing it on their own, we were picking up indications that some form of Israeli military involvement was going to lead to an actual series of mistakes. And these mistakes would be compounding and not good for large segments of the South Asian population.
It is being proffered by some wise individuals that any attack on Iran is going to elicit an extraordinary response from that country. However well they are able to do it, I can't project. But whatever they have, they're going to start throwing it back.
That, as well as that wasn't so much the issue. Yeah, there's in our forecast of it, there was a rather heavy price to pay for the attack. But our issue was the actual mistake made militarily that causes some kind of faux pas kind of an issue, or a nuclear radiation issue where they hadn't thought there was some, or a biohazard, something along these lines.
The destruction of an American nuclear aircraft carrier in the Gulf?
It could be something that leaves a lasting impression on a large segment of the South Asian population and turns most of that area against the Israelis in a very serious way.
Well, Muslim already down there.
No. I'm talking about extending far north into China, Japan. The Asian population get very serious about it.
In other words, an eastern cone of radioactive fallout.
Perhaps so.
Perhaps so. All right. We'll be right back with Clif. Clif, is there any data from your research that would suggest a winner of this dubious campaign season? I'm being polite. It's disgraceful.
I don't go there because the language is always so hot. There's very little nuance. Okay. So it makes any kind of interpretation very unreliable.
Okay, enough.
So we're rather crude at this. I mean, we've been doing it for a number of years, but our methodology and so forth is nowhere near as advanced as it will be in a number of other years. So we can't really differentiate. Everybody's, pro-Obama or pro-McCain. There's very little nuance to make any kind of differentiation with.
Understand. Okay. All right.
Now, on the other hand, we do have some, and have had some indications that the situation in October will impact the populace such that we get calls for early elections. We've had that for maybe 6 or 8 months, maybe even longer than that. I have to check with George. I lose track of the stuff. Maybe it's a situation of where events in the world place us into a situation where the feeling that comes across, let me put it this way, the feeling in the data that comes across is everybody gets to an exasperated state, and they're all sort of standing around saying, well, we know how it's going to come out, let's just get it over with. Not necessarily a pleasant, happy kind of hooray, hooray, things have changed kind of a deal, but done under duress.
Well, sense? Yeah, it does. I understand what you're saying.
Okay, and as to the other issue with a nuclear issue with the Israelis attacking Iran, it needn't be, because of the ambiguity of language, it need not necessarily be the humans directly suffering the problem. And we could have, for instance, an interesting sort of a mistake arise if the attacker uses some kind of really cool new bunker buster, happens to hit a nuke plant that's within a little bit of distance of a connecting what's called an interleave between the major oil fields there, and all the oil gets contaminated. Then you have a horrific situation in which most of the customers of the Iranian oil, fourth in the world, I think, in terms of production, China, et cetera, they'd be rather ticked off, I think.
Yes, to put it mildly. Very interesting. to contaminate the Iranian oil supply.
Yeah, and
It's
by conjecture, all the way south into the Saudis and Dubai and so on, because it's relatively well known these are not necessarily pockets. They feed off a series of strata that are interleaved and may cross-connect.
All right. So, if you like 2008, you're going to love 2009, and 2010. And 2010 is even going to be worse.
It's going to be a big, big emotional party. That's what we're getting the hints of. Correct.
And do we even dare go? It's pretty far out, but a lot of people are already making a lot of money on the doom of 2012.
Yeah, that's an interesting meme, and again, it's starting to lose nuance because of so many people piling in on it. And
are they?
Yeah, and not corrupting necessarily, but swelling certain components of it.
You're going to have to check out of that probably at some point. It's going to become so
polluted,
pervasive and polluted, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like, that's why we don't do celebrity stuff as well. I've had people say, go and do, some celebrity. And it's like, no, it doesn't quite work that way. You have to understand that everybody either hates person A or they love person A, and there's very little in between for us to get in there and gnaw on.
Okay. This winter, a cold winter for people who can't keep their homes heated, do we see food lines?
And indications that schools may close and government buildings may be impacted. And initially, it's kind of misleading in terms of the interpretation, but initially we see them being closed and then later on reopened as shelters of last resort.
Bread lines?
Yes, no question about it. Food prices are heading up.
Well, you know what they're doing? Those who are allegedly holding their food prices reasonably close to where they were 4 or 5 months ago are simply cutting the portions from 16 ounces to 12. So, it's smaller portions. Maybe that'll work wonders for some of the obesity in this country. I don't know.
That actually is not the issue, and I beg to differ with anybody that says, the obese are out there eating great quantities of the wrong food. Yes, that is true, but the underlying cause was a shift in our diet and what was allowed into the food chain. It began with high fructose corn syrup, among others.
Absolutely a killer. Yep.
Exactly, and it's been proven even in our pets now and so on, and it's horrific stuff. But it can be eliminated from the diet if you work at it.
Right. Sure, of course. All you have to do is spend a little time, understand what you're reading when you read a label. You need to read the labels. You'll figure it out. When it says natural or artificial flavors, you don't buy it. When it says FD&C, yellow number 30, red number 40, you don't buy it.
No, but it says, the second largest ingredient in there is high fructose corn
syrup or corn oil. You don't buy it.
Yeah. The issue is that they were able to label it as a fructose component, which is to say a fruit sugar, which it is not.
It's not
at
all.
It's a cane extract, and it's not digestible.
Well, that was a deal cut with the corn industry. Crooks at CDC and FDA. It
goes beyond that even, because was a concerted effort that began even in the 1880s and 1890s to remove certain items from the public education realm relating to the food supply, and it appears that was the actual beginning of the trend that was attempting to, if you will, pollute the food body for the nation as a whole. So it goes back that far.
Yeah, it's beyond polluting. We've heard an example of how the hidden hand is working through the internet to try to sow and certainly capitalize on events. It's very interesting. We have to assume that they're doing the same thing with the food. It is so toxic now. It is polluted and then some. It's deadly, and it is shortening people's lives. And of course, the bitter pill for us to swallow once we realize that is that they are becoming rich on the dead and dying bodies of those that they are slowly genociding with this food.
Yeah, and I don't really see yes, that's true, and it's horrific and so on. But the real horror, from my viewpoint, is the idea that this is done as a deliberate campaign in order to induce to create nebbish, if you will, cube farm slaves that are compliant and go along to get along and and so on.
You can count on that. I think that's exactly what they're doing. They're seemingly stripping what's left of the middle class down to a skeleton, as it were, and they're creating a two-tier lower class, the bottom of the barrel and then the top of the bottom of the barrel, and that's the lower class. And they're going to have a remnant of a middle class left, so the elite don't have to get their hands dirty interfacing with the lower classes.
Too bad it isn't going to quite work out that way, at least not according to our data.
What do you see? What do you see? We got 5 minutes.
We see that conditions will build to radicalization that would have made Che Guevara proud.
Really?
And we will see a global insurrection of absolute epic proportions.
To throw the yoke of domination and subjugation off?
And it is just, and when I say epic, it is because I am lacking any other descriptor that comes anywhere close to what's indicated.
Wow.
It makes the coming 5 months from October down into late January look like a set of warm-up exercises, a good set of crunches to get you ready for some Aikido training. And then
really?
you're going to get in on that mat and you're going to work. And that's going to go for a while.
Interesting. Rebellion in the ranks. Dissension in the ranks. And then some.
Ultimately, revolution and insurrection. You can't really call it revolution anymore when it's planet-wide.
No, you can't. This is fascinating. And how far out is this?
2010. Summer of 2010, it really gets rolling. Last 9 years.
People have just had it.
Yeah. And conditions get to the point where push finally has come to shove.
Hunger makes people brave and
also we're seeing a far different level. We're seeing the breakdown of central control and the return to tribalism for reasons that we just can't really get into at this point. But we just have some hints as to the whys involved, but nonetheless the pattern exists. It's all over the language.
You say
tribalism that will save us,
Tribalism. This is interesting.
The return to smaller group functioning and this decentralization brings about a response from the powers that be towards a more enforced fascism, if you will, on a global basis that leads to the radicalization. And as you say, people have finally just had it.
People are sort of self-segregating to begin with, and now as times get tougher and more brutal and ruthless, they're going to go into these tribes, if you will, I think with more intensity. I see what you're saying.
Right. We actually call them SOCs, self-organizing collectives. Yeah. Because the tribes are, in many cases, virtual or long connecting. You may have some real intense association with people you never meet. And then under the, certain circumstances, all have to pull together physically. You might meet them after an association of many years.
Self-organizing collectives.
Yeah. Fancy word for tribe, yeah.
Well, I call it self-segregating, but whatever.
The same difference, yeah. And we're seeing it all over now. We're seeing it form. And to a certain extent, it's a centralized, or it gets to the core of what it is to be human. Humans are not meant to be slaves. We're not meant to be centrally organized. Our brains work best with 145 people or less in our memory space dealing with at any given time. We're not intended to be part of giant organizations, and we rebel against it frequently. What we're seeing is a natural response of that and an amplification, if you will, from whatever source globally, whether it's population pressure or manipulation or whatever, it doesn't matter, but things get out of hand for the powers that be.
Well, it won't come soon enough for a lot of us out here.
When the time is right. It comes too soon,
Right. So it looks like 09 is going to be tough. 010 is going to be quite a year.
Yeah, now's the time to start doing your exercises, getting good food, get strong to go long, as we say.
Yeah. Clif, thank you. It's always great to talk with you. We'll do it again soon.
Yeah, sure. Everybody loves talking with me. The subject matter is rather depressing, and I recognize
No. We like reality.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Sure. Talk to you later.
Good night.
Bye.
HalfPastHuman.com. You can subscribe and read the Alta reports. Clif High and George Ewer. Fascinating material. We'll be back in 21 hours. See you at Rense.com in the meantime.